Hi, my name is David Weaver, and I'm an entomologist at Montana State University. Montana State is a participant in the 2023 Wheat Stem Sawfly Survey. That's a multi-state effort being led out of Nebraska by Dr. Jeffrey Bradshaw. I'm going to spend a little bit of time today showing you how to collect the data quickly and easily for the sampling that's required for your sawfly part of it. So very briefly, what I'm standing in is a field of spring wheat that was recently harvested here. And this wheat was harvested by a header stripper. So in a minute, Jackson, who's running the camera, a graduate student at MSU, is going to pan and show you that it's header stripper harvested. Just basically means the residue is higher, which is good for conserving parasitoids of wheat stem sawfly. And we're going to go through the exact sampling. So when I walk over here to everything you need, you can see the header stripper harvest residue here. You can see some wheat stem sawfly cuttings here. And this is everything you need. This is the data sheet, which we've already entered the grower name, the variety, the harvest and planting dates. And we have a orientation of our materials here. So this is a measuring stick for a 30 centimeter sample. We used a measuring tape, which I put back in my vehicle, didn't mean to measure 5 meters in and 50 meters either way. This is the center point C. And what you would do if you want to collect a sample is just go ahead and lay this down. If we look closely, it has these two nails here. We use those to lay them right on the edge of where we want to collect the sample from. And then we can either pull it up by hand, which we could do here this year because there's been a lot of moisture, or we could use this, which is a bit of overkill, but this is a sharpshooter shovel with a really powerful blade, and it's really good for digging hard, dry ground, which we don't happen to have here.
So, as David mentioned, I'm going to demonstrate using the shovel to loosen and extract our sample. So we just put the shovel on the opposite side of the row as our sample stick. And the only thing you need to make sure of is it's not too close because we don't want to actually disrupt the stems underneath the soil. And just apply pressure until you can lift up that root bottom. And then once you've got your sample lifted, now we need to be cognizant of where those nails are. Make sure we're extracting only the stems that are within both the nails. So once we have all our stems, another important part is to make sure that there's no cut stubs in the loose soil. So once we've checked that, we can either place our sample inside our bag and take it out of the field to finish our count. Or if you want to use it here, we could use the bag as a tray to do our sorting. So now we just need to extract all that dirt off the bottom of these stems. All right, so now we have all of our stems cleaned of dirt, and now we're going to sort them into two groups, one for the uncut stems and one for the cut stems. Another important part of this is making sure stems don't get counted twice. And one way that can happen is if you have broken stems in your sample, where we can see this stem is broken, it's not cut. I'm going to discard this from my sample because the bottom of that stem is still going to be included in this group. So I'll just count the bottom. If I'm finding broken tops, like I mentioned, we'll just discard those and we're just counting the bottom portion of our stems. Okay, so I've got my pile. Now I'm going to start filtering it into groups. And it's important as you're doing this, you're feeling for stubs or bottoms that are masked by the leaves that are hanging on. Okay, so here's another good example. This is about the height a cut stub would be, but this is in fact not a stub. This is actually just a broken stem, as we mentioned before. And if you look closely, we can see that it's not filled with frass. But if it looks confusing, you can reconfirm that by splitting it with your thumbnail or using a knife. And when we open it up inside, we can see there's no frass or Sawfly within its hibernaculum. So that's just in fact a broken stem. So I'll include that with the uncut pile. And here's an example of a cut stub. And so we can see it's got this nice clean cut around it, and we can see it's filled with frass. And again, we can reconfirm that by splitting it. And so now we can see the actual hibernaculum of the Sawfly. All right, so we finished the sorting, and I have 31 stems in my uncut group and 1 cut stem. And so I'll mark those down in the data sheet and move on to the next sample location.
Hi, my name is Jackson. I'm a graduate student here at Montana State University in David's lab. As you can see here, this is our fallow field. It's directly across from our field that was grown this year. This is where the majority of our sawflies are going to come from. So they'll emerge in the spring and they'll fly across the road, and you'll get heavy infestation right in the edge. So I've got samples from both sides. On my right hand here, you can see samples from the field that was grown this year. And then on this side, you can see the weathered stems from the field that was fallow and grown last year. So due to natural variation in the field, this area of the field is showing much higher proportions of cutting compared to the other sections. You can see that there's a lot of stems on the ground and a lot of structural damage. So you're definitely going to need the shovel for taking samples in these kind of areas, so that you make sure you get all of the stubs and you don't just get the stems.
Hey, I just thought I'd take an opportunity to show you something that you might encounter while you're out there. It isn't part of this year's actual survey, but it's pretty useful information. So things can kill sawflies in the stems, and we have a couple of examples here. What I'm going to show, and I'll need to get a little closer to Jackson so he can film this. There's a very small hole here that's been made by a parasitoid that killed a wheat stem sawfly. So you can see this hole going through this outer leaf, or a sheath. Now if I pull that back, you can see that the hole is still there. That's probably from a parasitoid, either a Bracon cephi or a Bracon lysigaster. Inside of the stem was a big larval sawfly at one point. It was paralyzed by the adult parasitoid, which laid an egg here. It killed the sawfly, and the new adult parasitoid came out that little tiny hole there. So that's the parasitoids. Now, in this hand, we have a really rare find, which you don't often see. This is a stub that's intact, like you've seen already. This is a stub that has this weird hole in it. That looks a lot like the holes that wheat stem sawflies make when they emerge from the stubs. But this time of year, that's not a wheat stem sawfly. What that is actually a predatory clarid beetle that we first reported on in 2001. It's called Phallobanius dubius, and it's chewed its way out of the plug that was made after it killed the sawfly larva. Okay, so here's another example of something just to make it a little more clear. This is actually the sawfly larva inside of the stub. You can see it here. It's not yet formed a hibernaculum, but it will to overwinter. But that's a big sawfly larva. There's no mistaking it. So that's why we're not so worried about you mistaking broken for sawfly cut stems. This has that very, very distinctive cutting that's from the sawfly rather than a broken stem. We're going to show you another version of this where we're doing it on the end of pickup. The idea is you don't need a whole bunch of bags. You just need bags with letters A to E on them, and you can use them in multiple fields. You could always go out, collect all your 5 fields worth, and use a separate bag for each set of bags for each field, but it's really not necessary. It's easy enough to do it in the field. So I'm going to sort through this and sort it into cut and uncut stems. Okay, so in this example, we had 35 stems. 33 were intact. 2 were cut, and I want to just show you a couple of examples of There was also a lot of broken material here, so I'm going to step closer to Jackson. So this is a cut stem by Wheat Stem Sawfly here. This is a broken off one. Again, the easiest way to tell whether it's got sawflies in it or not is to use your thumbnail. There's no frass in there. And in this one, there should be a sawfly larva and frass. And lo and behold, there's frass. And there's a larva all the way down at the crown. I'll try to expose that a bit better. There it is. Can't really see it very easily. So I'll tip it up. There it is. So that's the larva. It's encased in a hibernaculum. The one we showed you before was nice and creamy white. That yellowish skin on the outside is a protective layer that it makes for overwintering. Also, one of the things we wanted to share was just showing you this this example of when you have more heavy cutting. You oftentimes have the stems that were cut by the wheat stem sawfly. As you can see, this is part of the economic loss. The heads are still on the ground rather than being in the threshed and in the combine hopper. And when you try to pull up the material, you will find that there's a lot of stubs. And so structurally, like Jackson said recently, it's a little hard to get all of it unless you're careful with the shovel to do that. But if you do see that, where you see a lot of material on the ground, it's nice and easy to tell whether it's been cut by wheat stem sawflies by picking one of the severed stems and looking for the other side of the cutting, which looks just the same.
So we just thought we'd add another note here. Jackson and I were out here today collecting samples for my research. As you can see, we have these barrels stuffed full of samples. Same sampling protocol, but for my research, I'm studying the sawfly variation within a field. So we grab those same samples from a uniform grid across the field. So grabbing samples in this manner can be very useful for studying populations at whatever scale you're interested in.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our other fields, and later on we'll share a little summary of what we saw across all 5 of those fields. Just a little tiny bit more detail about this site. This field was chosen because it's close to a university-grown nursery, an MSU nursery nearby here, and we really appreciate the access to this land by the grower, Frank Grenewig. And we also appreciate the support of our Montana Wheat and Barley Committee, who funds our project and pays for the graduate research of Lachlan and Jackson.